I would say corporate social responsibility is not just the corporates who have a liability of spending the money, but it's also a huge number of other people. So you have, of course, the NGO, the not-for-profits. You also have for-profit organizations who work in this space. You have governments, you have grants, you have community, you have connected with the community or in the community. You have so many other agencies who are working, or recipients, or even drivers or influencers, or provide services. So it's a huge industry. But if we have to narrow down my responses, I'll probably shrink it to the corporate social responsibility, the companies who are, I would say, the custodians of this money, who have a responsibility to spend this money. Um, Again, I think if we have to look across, what would it take? If I have to give a very generic answer, non-academic answer, but a very practical answer, I think it would be, um, do people have clarity as to why they are here in this industry? And is their intention to work in the sector really very, very strong? Because somewhere you're going to be very disappointed by the experiences that you get if you don't have what they call, I mean, the Hindi word for it is coming to my mind, which is passion, is jazba, right? So if you are not really someone who wants to be part of this entire gamut or circus of change, creating change in our country, then I think you won't last long here.
What was it like teaching in Jammu and Kashmir, Gazal?
Yeah, I think that was the, I would say, like the aha moment for me, which gave me, I would say, divine direction as to what I wanted to do. I remember that moment very clearly. This wasn't a planned, premeditated move into teaching, but rather a moment of very instinctive, a suggestion that I made at a social evening in an army mess, when I heard that. There was actually no primary school, or even a pre-primary school for the children of the factory workers there. And I said, if and they lose out on their primary years of education, they go to school only probably when they are in grade one. Mostly girls don't end up going to school. And I instinctively said, why don't we start a school here, within our unit? And I think everybody dismissed it as something like a way of remark, and I held on to it. And I remember that it kept me awake the whole night. And the next morning, I actioned it, and that's what I think began my career journey of starting a school. I do remember that it was like a. Of course, there was a lot of resources, and I'm grateful to the army and our unit there, and our commandant, who gave me like a check, unconditional check, a piece of land, resources. And then, of course, we started this journey of actually setting up the 1FOD nursery school, looking at hiring teachers, and in a very small hamlet called Udhampur, which is off the Udhampur city, also, to actually find teachers and then convince the parents to send their children to a absolutely brand new school. I think
Right.
I was the administrator, I was the principal, I was the teacher, I was the chaprasi, I was everything. So for quite some time, but what it helped me to understand is, this is where I want to be, and I think it was a huge aha moment for me. It also pushed me into understanding that unless I study education, I am not going to go anywhere. So, of course, then I went on to also do my bachelor's in education from Jammu University. So, yes, technically, I would give a lot of gratitude to that moment, to which was the start point of my career.
Corporate social responsibility, or CSR, is something that is uh, the awareness is spreading. And there are a lot of opportunities opening up as companies understand that they're part of the larger society they live in, and contributing to the growth definitely does help the objectives of the company as well. And today we have someone who's taken that as a career and worked on it for over 25 years. And she has experience in education, in employee volunteering. And those, when she started off in a small school in Jammu and Kashmir, which she initiated and did the early work to make it grow, it made her curious about the entire landscape and what are the motivations of teachers and schools. And she went on to work with an NGO that worked on school transformation and empowerment. So, in her varied career, she has worked with extremely large organizations like Ford Motor Company, Standard Chartered, and Goodera. And she's worked with grassroots organizations as well. So she has a complete understanding of what it means to work in a very small company with very limited resources, charitable organizations, and for very large companies for whom funds are relatively easier to come by. So she uses that experience to help organizations, companies, and people achieve their objectives. And today, we're going to talk to her about how all this became possible. So, Gazal, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you, Benu. Thank you so much for this opportunity to actually share, or I would say, some life learnings as well as talk to you. So, thank you so much.
Great. So, what was early childhood? Where was it? And where did you grow up?
Very early childhood, of course, was in Delhi. I am originally a Kashmiri Pandit and born and brought up in Delhi. Also traveled with my family. My dad's work took us to all the way to Bihar, Kuwait, and then back to Delhi. So I finished my college and my undergrad in Delhi, back in Delhi. So Delhi has a lot of fond memories of being like where our roots come from. But of course, we are originally Kashmiri, but a lot of growing year memories are in Delhi.
Okay. Okay. And did you have a fair idea of what you wanted to do? Were there some vague ideas of what you wanted to achieve in a career, or was it something that happened? It was happenstance, it was a combination of luck and circumstances.
Yes, actually, now just looking back, unlike what I would have liked to do, a lot of what I landed up as a career was something I just felt guided towards. And I actually started my career way back. If I have to even fast track and rewind my career as a teacher in education, was at the ITC Maurya Sheraton, which was almost like like an internship that I did towards the fag end of my college. Was also something that was led by curiosity. So I think led by curiosity, some divine timing, and my gut instinct to explore things that I've not done earlier was how
Okay.
I think I see my career. And of course, later on, I have to add a lot of a mention and gratitude to my mentors and people who advised me on what to do. But yes, largely I think I've been very blessed to be in to have navigated my way through the sector of having worked with smaller organizations, having worked as a teacher, which I feel I don't think my personality today would have been what it is today if I had not been a teacher, because I enjoyed through that stint enormous love and support and of the students that I taught. And I think also it's a privileged position to be for any human being, because the adulation that you get from your students is parallel to none. Yes, I think I still have a lot of them writing to me on Teachers' Day many years, after I have sort of exited their classroom. So yes, I think a lot of, I would say, gratitude to the mentors and people whom I met who advised me and the opportunities that came my way.
So careers typically have a mix of all of these, your capabilities, the people that you come across with, the circumstances that you're thrown into. So where exactly can you pinpoint the point at which you got interested in CSR?
Yes, I think it was a very interesting turn, I would again say that while people would think it was a very strategic move into corporate CSR, because the year that I moved to iGate Technologies, which later got acquired by Capgemini and became Capgemini, it got integrated into Capgemini, was the year the CSR law came into action. So, of course, we all of us. I was working for a not-for-profit. We were aware of this transition, not aware of the kind of quantum of change that it would bring in into the industry. But that was a time I distinctly remember. I was heading a project which was funded by a few companies, and of course received a lot of grants. And I also realized that somewhere the corporates who sat on the other side did not understand the depth of work, or did not understand the language that the not-for-profit wants to speak about creating change on ground. And I felt that maybe I think it would always benefit to have someone in the corporate who comes from the social sector and the not-for-profit sector. And so I think probably the universe heard what I wanted to do, and I got an opportunity to lead the CSR team for iGate Technologies, who was just putting in a team because they wanted to also now streamline and scale what they were doing under their CSR projects now with the law coming in. So I think that was
So what were
the
the,
transition.
sorry, the question that you brought about, that companies themselves are coming to terms with understanding what, doing projects in this particular sector involved. So what were among the kind of confusion that prevailed at the time, and what were the first steps that you took?
Right. I think the first thing was that there is now a law around it, right? So it is no longer driven by charity or a sense of philanthropy about just doing some good for the community. So it now became, there was a very strong need to comply with it, with under the legal, or trying to meet all the legal requirements. Second thing was that I think there needed to be a structure around it, and there needed to be a formula about what you're trying to do, which meant that a company would look at taking up projects who, which were trying to solve a social problem, had certain interventions which which had to be measured, and which the outcomes had to be very scientific. So it was no longer going to be a random set of philanthropic or charity driven events, which probably people in the leadership would suggest would be a good place to go to. So there was a need to look at the community needs, and then there was a need to also look at why a company was trying to solve a certain problem. So I think that's where a lot of people came together. Of course, the management needed to sit and have a vision as to what they want to do with this money every year that they're going to spend as CSR. What was the rationale and the reason for them to align it with the company goals and values and mission? On the other hand, I think, of course, a lot of you'll understand that a lot of branding also came into being when it came to the community social work. So organizations also wanted to be projecting what they were doing in the right lens. And then, of course, I do remember very early on, and I'm talking about 2013 14, when I was in iGate, I also realized that a huge untapped potential for every company are their employees. And if
Okay.
apart from giving money, apart from cutting the check, if employees can also participate in driving change in the society, in the communities, then it's a huge, I would say, like a hidden potential that remains untapped. And I think I'm very lucky that the management and the company saw the rationale and the passion that I wanted to bring in through employee volunteering. And that also became a very, very strong, I would say, life goal for me as I entered into various companies to do CSR, is to also initiate and introduce the concept of employee volunteering.
So what was among the first projects that you did in CSR at iGate?
Um, I remember that we looked at consolidating what we were doing under the education vertical, and I think that's what was the company's mission. They wanted to influence the way learning happened in schools. They wanted to understand how do we improve the enrollment numbers for students. How do we improve the experience of a student when they come to the government schools? Can we also look at getting them the right resources, whether it was teachers, whether it is teachers who are infused into the system, whether it's just basic notebooks, school bag? I think iGate did a lot. It did a wonderful project called Project Akshara, where every year I think close to about 5 lakh notebooks were distributed across cities to government schools, and this was done again under volunteering. So I think there was a very strong drive to consolidate what we were doing under education, and how was it really making a meaningful change to the students, or to the school community, I would say.
Okay. And you were at iGate for how long? Or, why don't we then go back to the part where it started in terms of what work were you doing with the NGOs and with schools, and probably take it along that direction? Because I want people to get an idea of how you came into this and what were the various motivations that drove you to go further down the road and then make changes when required.
Yeah. If I look back, actually, Venu, I think education has been the link in all of this. So if you look at the school that I started, to then going on to do actually study my BA, B.Ed, and then do my masters, and then start my career in working in various schools across the country, and some of the, I would say, the most finest schools in terms of really out of the box thinking, emphasizing on learning rather than teaching, and then really giving the children a very holistic environment for development is what I think these schools emphasized on, and I think that's the foundation for me as a teacher. And then if you look at the next link was working in an NGO called the Teacher Foundation in Bangalore. A very remarkable organization, as well as the work that we did there together as a team, and working in schools, looking at teacher education, looking at school management, looking at pedagogy, also looking at whole school transformation. That was a project that I was driving with the team there, which looked at affordable private sector schools and how teaching learning could be transformed in these schools through long-term project, which ran for about 2.5, 3 years. So post which, again, the link and entry into CSR was through the theme of education, and how education continues, I think, to be the number one spend sector under CSR. If we look at it, of course, it has. I would say it is probably the numbers have stabilized over the years, and with environment and tech also moving in. But that was the link that connected me in all my assignments. So I think the passion for working in this space of education. Also over the years now, of course, I understood deeply what this space would be. So working in the private sector school space, to working in a lot with affordable private sector schools, international schools, and then of course the government sector space, which of course you work with when you get into corporate CSR. So I think that was the link, and right down to, I think, all the assignments that I had, I do see that the education piece was always something that was strong. So while I did a lot of other aspects and themes in my portfolio, I think that sort of now almost runs in my blood.
Okay. So what were some of the differences that you noticed with government schools and schools that were, had children come in from privileged backgrounds? Was it a lack of confidence in the younger ones, or what came out strongly when you worked in schools which were, kids from the lower socioeconomic sector?
Of course, huge difference. Children who came from private sector schools came from families where a lot of things were taken care for them. The access to education was easier. Your basic, I would say, bread and butter was taken care of. Needs were taken care of. You came from parents who had a certain level of education. Everything stemmed from that, and of course you didn't have to worry about what your family would do probably the next year or the years after that. Whereas in the government sector, in the affordable private sector space, some of the things that were glaring were, I would say, in the affordable private sector more than the government sector was the lack of very basic infrastructure which is available. I would say the government schools, while they may not be, the best in terms of the maintenance of this physical infrastructure, but I think the affordable private sector schools were in very small, cramped places. Teachers worked on very low salaries. Some of them were not trained in teacher education. They did not have much, I would say, access to resources of how they could teach differently. Classrooms had close to about 60, 70 children in a very small space. So a lot of scientific principles of child psychology, teacher education, subject matter expert, resources, teaching, learning, pedagogy were not really in place. So it was more of like a survival for those teachers and the children there. So it was a very interesting learning space, especially if you come from a very privileged private sector teaching background. To now look at the harsh reality of this particular sector, which often you don't come across or you don't get to influence. So it was a huge learning experience for me. I do remember some of the teachers saying that so we had a process of giving feedback to a teacher, and before we did that, we were also trained on how to give feedback very objectively. We do not become very subjective sort of critiques of the teacher, but give them objective feedback. And I do remember some of the teachers would actually break down and start crying because they said no one has ever given us any feedback and said we are doing a good job. I think that's the sad reality of the education space of the teachers that we have. Of course, the government school space also was a huge learning, especially the one in the rural areas. This was when I was in Ford Motor Company, and we were launching our school adoption program in rural Tamil Nadu. I think one of the most remarkable, I think, experiences that I've had till date is experiencing how the government schools work there, the zeal and the passion that teachers and the headmasters have to give it all, the harsh reality of the children and what they experience in those schools, and but also a fire to learn and to aspire and to grow in life. I think that's what I have always seen, and I think that's why the CSR programs that are run in schools or in the rural areas, you will see the aspiration levels really get kindled to do more and more than the urban areas.
Okay, great. I'm speaking to Gazal Raina, and she has diverse experience in the CSR sector. It so happened that she was working at a company that was taken over by Capgemini, iGate, and then it she naturally gravitated towards doing CSR projects. She's worked largely in education, and she's worked at schools which are, catering to children from privileged families. And she's also worked with schools which are very small, government schools, which have a lack of resources. And as she mentioned, the teachers are poorly paid. The children themselves have no exposure compared to what children from the well-to-do schools or the more privileged schools get. But it also means that the corporates then get a chance to raise the standard for across education and give more and more young children a chance to succeed and thrive. So, in the next segment, I'll be speaking to Ghazal about what it takes to work in CSR. What are the expectations? What are the opportunities? And what are the challenges as well as the rewards of working in the CSR sector? So, my name is Venugopal. I head Ideascape. And every week we take people on these career journeys or we listen to their career journeys. So, if you like what you're listening to, please share, subscribe, and let more people know. So back to Ghazal. So in terms of salaries and entry points, Ghazal, what are the things that you think in terms of mindsets? What is it that people should expect, and what are the kind of qualities that best equip a person to succeed in this?
Right. So, if you're looking at, I mean, now the a career in corporate social responsibility could mean a lot of different things, because this is now, a legal reform in our country. We're the only country in the world to have this, the law come in where it is mandated for companies of a certain size to give back a part of their profit. So it has created a huge industry, because, like a lot of other industries, there are going to be hardships. There is bureaucracy. There is unfortunately corruption. There is also frustration in creating that change, because you're dealing with so many agencies. You're dealing with organizations, and it has its high points and low points. But I think what keeps people going is, do you have a passion to be a change maker here? And then, of course, that change making doesn't have to be only because you are on a seat where you're giving money. It's also you're a change maker when you receive the money as a not for profit, because without the NGOs, I always say, you cannot really, corporates cannot, most of them who don't have their own foundations and giving arms cannot do their legal spend. So I think one is the intention. Do you really have a very strong intention to give back and be a change maker? Two is, I think, which I feel is respect. Do you respect the sector, and do you believe that yes, there can be change through it? A lot of times we are so disillusioned by what is happening that we start to actually resent where we are. And I think you have to believe that I'm here as a change maker. And I have to deal with all kinds of things which actually are resisting the change that we want to create in the sector. Three is, I think you really have to keep updating and educating yourself about what is coming up in the sector. Um, do you love traveling? Do you love seeing projects? Do you have a mindset to actually co-create change, bringing all of the collaborators in, whether it's an NGO, whether it's a government, whether it is, philanthropic agencies, all of them together have to collaborate. um, I would say five is, do you also have the propensity to upgrade and update yourself, reskill yourself? Because the mindset that you had 4 years back, 3 years back, 5 years back cannot hold you further if you don't believe in looking at how you can change. So I think there's like any other sector, there is also a need to update your skills as you go along. The
So
sixth
where
would
would
be
you?
people person.
Sorry, sorry.
Yeah, I think the sixth would be that you have to understand this is a very intensive work and industry, and you have to take people along rather than just be an individual contributor. So I think these are some of the things that are coming to my mind, which are
Okay.
skills that you require, and of course, like whether you're mid manager, entry level, or you're a CSR leader.
So what are the entry level positions, and what does it pay typically? If you could give me a band.
The band is difficult to give because it depends on the company, frankly, Venu. So it also depends on which institute are you coming from. So of course your BSW, MSW are like gold standards in a very for entry level people who want to get into CSR. But if you look at a company's corporate social responsibility team, you do have now, of course, the law also allows you to spend some part of your money on putting together a team who would drive your corporate social responsibility operations. So that is why I think the salaries have gotten better, but also require you to have the professional degrees, like I said, BSW or MSW, or a degree from IRMA. I think there are a lot of diplomas and certificate courses as well. I think the IICA does a lot of courses for reskilling as well as entry level people. So I think there are a host of courses that are available. But at the same time, there are also people who make a lateral entry into from their companies into the CSR team. There are
Yeah.
people who probably are, from a technical background or a finance background, but they have a passion for social work, and they put up their hands to say, I want to join the team. So sometimes they're there for a period of 3 to 5 years, and I know some of the most remarkable CSR leaders today in the country have made a lateral jump and never gone back. So there's no hard and fast rule here, but of course, as an entry professional degree, you do need that. You do need a degree, and companies look at placements from that aspect as well. But they do look at a lot of people laterally moving into their CSR team.
So would around 3 to 4 lakhs be a fairly decent starting point, or is it lower than that or above that? It can vary. I'm just trying to put a figure so that
Yeah.
people know exactly what they have to be prepared for.
Yeah, I think 5 lakhs would be like a good starting point for, and depends on, like I said, depends on the company, whether you're an MNC or you're an Indian company, or what is the designation role that you have. I would say close to about 5 to 8 lakhs is what people can expect.
Is the band that people. And what would they start doing in the early days on the job? What are the kind of things? Is it a lot of field work? Is it analysis? It's office job? And are they assigned projects based on what their superiors think that they will be good at?
Yes, so now it depends on what is the maturity of the CSR, the work that they are doing, the company is doing under CSR. So, for example, if you have joined a company where there is a very small team and the company has just started to become eligible for CSR, and now they put together a two-member team. So there's a CSR head and there is let's say, a CSR associate who's looking at driving whatever they're doing. So this would mean that they would be putting a lot of things at a foundational level, right? So they would actually be working a lot with first the internal stakeholders. So you'll do a lot of work with the finance and the legal team and the management to set processes. Do you have a core committee? Do you have a board? What is the structure that needs to be followed? Doing the vision mission within the organization to understand where the money should be going into the sector. And then, of course, once you've set that out, then you start looking at collaboration. Who would be the partners for the thematic areas or the projects that you would like to spend money on? And that's how I think the team would start looking at moving from probably year one, where they are setting structure, they're setting processes, MOUs, partnerships, and then I think year two, year three, they would start to scale up depending on the budgets. So a lot of work internally that will happen. It is also, I would say, the team gets into an interesting role because they also become custodians of the CSR law for a large number of people in the organization. Because CSR is something the company would have never spent. So they also go about educating people about what the law is, why they should be doing things in a certain way. These teams also double up as employee volunteer teams because they also want to now start to kick off getting their employees to get involved. Whereas on the other hand, if you join a team which has already been doing CSR for the last 8, 10 years, now you're entering a very mature team. If you're entering as an entry level person, you would probably be assigned to a thematic area. Let's say the company is invested in the areas of education, environment, agriculture, livelihood. You will probably be assigned into one of the verticals, looking at probably a few aspects of a certain projects. That's how your initiation is going to be. So the larger the portfolio, the more number of verticals that you have. Companies also use now a lot of tech to enable and to facilitate and understand where the money is going. Of course, the younger you are, you will be required to run around a lot, and you'll be the foot soldier on the ground as well. But largely, CSR teams are always on the move. They're visiting projects, they're gathering data, they're facilitating, they're being partners with their not-for-profits. They're also assessing risks, failures, because at the end of the day, this is compliance. This requires meeting all of the checks and balances which are required. So they are constantly on the watch for making sure that reporting is in place, the monitoring and evaluation frameworks depict the right kind of success and metrics that are there. So it's a huge. I think I don't see any CSR teams who have time to breathe, and they're constantly, constantly pressed for time.
Okay. So if the choice was between doing an internship in a CSR project, joining a small company, or joining a company where the CSR team is already in place and they have several projects, what do you think is prime learning ground for a candidate?
Uh, I think if you, it also depends on what you want, right? If learning on ground is what you want, then I think I would say joining a small company where there is a small team and you're just starting to do some work on the projects would be the best. It would be like getting baptized by fire. So, because you wear in a small company, you wear all the hats. You don't have a choice. Like not some, you wear all the hats. You get to learn across the grades. You learn to set systems, processes. So your ability to, I would say, you will be required to you learn very quickly as well as execute even faster. So there is a lot of risk of failure, but at the same time, there is also I think the joy of actually driving that organization and co-creating something. So I think that's the if you want to learn, that's probably the best opportunity of learning by having the pride of contributing yourself. If you want to learn by a ringside view, and you want to really be part of something which is really large, like large projects, multi-crore, multi-year, you want to be part of being part of organizations who are actually working at a national level, working with the government, even globally, then probably getting into a company which has a large company where your role you may be a small, I would say small fish, but then getting to see the scale and how it is done is a better opportunity.
You have two completely different sets of audiences you're dealing with. One is the management, and the other is the on ground people that you're interacting with, both of which I think require substantially different people handling capabilities and documentation. Is that a challenge?
Um, I won't say it's a challenge. I think it's added advantage, especially I think internally in organizations. If you come from having experience with grassroots, working with grassroots organizations, or you understand the sector through the grassroots organizations, you're always respected, and that's what I have received from from within the organization and management is tremendous respect and. You are also recognized as a sectoral expert because you've come from the ground up. Um, I think what you also become is, and you should become, is a translator. So you have to understand, you have to make the management and the organization understand the challenges that the community or the NGOs face when they are asked to work on projects. Very often, organizations are, and I mean, with due respect, very risk averse, and they are failure averse because they are spending money and they don't want to take a chance with having to put their money where there's failure. And I think that's the difference that people in the sector, when you put in a few years and you have some gray on your hair, you have to bring in is um, the room for failure, because failure here is not about being risky, but it's about investing money through trial and error. And that, like any industry, that's what is the research in the social sector needs to come only when you allow the NGOs some room to also say that this may not work out. We are looking at placing at least 40 to 50% students, but we are doing now working with certain student groups which are, let's say, in extremely difficult situations or difficult geographies. We may not even reach 30%, but if we reach that 30%, it's good because at least those 30% students have access to now getting placed into jobs and greater economic independence. But a lot of companies are very averse to that. So I think you have to play the role of a translator and helping the NGOs to understand what is it that the corporate wants, how can you bring your model, make it very robust to get to a place? And you have to help the management understand that this is not a business metrics. This is social. You're working in the social sector. You're working with people, and you're trying to change systems. And while you're trying to make it very futuristic, you're also trying to undo the kind of lag and lethargy that's been in the system for many, many years. So always helps if you have experience on both sides.
Okay, great. So I'm speaking to Ghazal, and I didn't know that India is the only country which has enacted this law on CSR, which is a wonderful thing when you look at it, because it's one thing to say that people should be charitable or they should look at their responsibility, but it's another thing when it's a part of the legal process and companies have to do it. She spoke long and eloquently about the kind of qualities you need to have, the passion that has to drive you. I like the word jazba, which is really, it's a wonderful explanation of what it requires to be the person to be. So, unless you are really interested, there is no point in thinking that because it's glamorous and because it involves social work, it'll be a good outlet for you. What I was particularly struck by is the amount of work that one needs to do. And it never is easy because you're dealing with people who come from very diverse kind of backgrounds, and the challenges that appear in one sector may not be the ones that you're doing on a different project at all. She also spoke very clearly about what are the best entry level points given what you are interested in, which I think is an important consideration if you're ever thinking of entering the sector. A small company which is starting off with CSR activities, a second one which is kind of established, and the third is which sector are they working in. So, does that give you more insights? So, if you've liked what you listened to so far, please share, subscribe, let more of your friends know. And in the final segment, I'll be talking to Ghazal about what are the rewards and what are the challenges? What are the things that she really remembers from some of the projects that she's done so far? And what is it that keeps her going as far as the sector is concerned? So, Ghazal, give me a couple of incidents which have happened on projects that you can recall where the change suddenly became very evident to you.
Yeah, I think something that really comes on top of my mind is a project that we were driving as part of the Ford Motor Company CSR. Um, the I think the fact that we were now looking at moving beyond the Chennai city to investing and looking at contributing to schools beyond the urban landscape. And I remember
Okay.
that the management was, very interested or very particular that we should be able to never let down the kind of monitoring, I would say the guidelines as well as the ability to actually see the progress, and that's where we launched a program. It was called Sons and Daughters of the Soil. Very interestingly, of course, like a lot of other corporates, majority of the people did not come from the city, but they came from smaller cities and towns and villages, and they all came to the city to work to start their careers and continue to do so, but their roots and their hearts were still where they came from. And this program actually was a call out to employees to ask them that if there is a school that you have studied, or there is a school in your hometown which you feel can be supported or adopted by the company, then put up your hand and become a champion for this school. So we actually rolled out a formal program and a campaign asking people to come and nominate themselves. And of course, they had to provide data, they had to provide a lot of details from the schools that they were nominating. And surprisingly, we were overwhelmed with entries. We had a nomination, we had a jury, we had shortlisted close to about 6 to 7 employees who then went on to become the hands and the legs for this program along with the NGO partner. And what an amazing journey of the 5 years that we drove this program on ground, seeing the kind of from seeing the schools in their bare sort of entity. When you went there, absolutely nobody, no companies were doing programs there. They had some very, very basic challenges with infrastructure, or with student dropout, with drug abuse, teenage pregnancies, with a lot of violence, and of course, teaching learning challenges that the teacher faced, to then slowly seeing the transformation through also the building the leadership of the school, through seeing empowering the capabilities of the student, and then of course bringing in changes through the infrastructure, as well as mindset changes in the students as well. So I do remember this one of the most remarkable projects. I would probably never ever forget, because I think we saw the change when we traveled to these schools quarter on quarter, and then finally to see the schools actually become sustainable in managing and drawing a roadmap for themselves.
Okay, great. This requires a lot of documentation. So, how is documentation done today? Is it in the form of reports? Do you prepare videos? How exactly is the process captured of change?
So, of course, documentation currently plays a very, very important role. One, from the fact that because this is mandated, this is a compliance issue. You need to have your documentation reported not just internally to the company. The company also reports it to the government every year. It is part of the entire, the annual report of the organization. So there are various people and various, like from finance to legal, who are tracking the kind of progress that you're making and the way the money is spent. Um, I think largely companies and NGOs follow a mix of technology. Of course, now there are a lot of platforms, AI. There are a host of like softwares which are available for tracking the kind of work that or progress that you're doing at projects. Of course, companies who are into very large CSR spends have their own platform and dashboards for reporting this. Apart from that, of course, you have programmatic reports, your financial reports, you have utilization reports, you have audited utilization reports. So a lot of them, I think all of them come under the framework of what the law requires you to do. And I think the intention, while it is not to increase the load of the not-for-profit, but I think it does become very, very laborious for, and I know that NGOs spend a lot of time in creating those reports. But yes, I think the intention is to keep tracking and mapping out the progress of how the project is going, and documenting those with quantifiable metrics, with other parameters that would help us to understand whether the project is on track.
Could you give us a little more about why CSR doesn't have to originate from corporates alone? What does the sector cover, and what are the various functions that people can look at?
Yeah, I think I like to take this very differently. I do see a large number of people. If we look at corporate, and then I see the entire broader industry of corporate CSR, in which includes for profits, not for profits. I do see people not coming only from a very traditional social sector background, and I think I would say that's a huge plus, because they bring in a lot of them bring in the business acumen, a lot of them bring in the need for change, they bring a very fresh outlook, they bring in a lot of other technical mindsets, which probably people in the social sector, I'm not saying they don't have, but which adds a freshness to it. So it has become a confluence of people across the sectors. I know a lot of people who come into the social sector in a CSR role, whether it is head of a foundation or an NGO, or let's say a corporate as well, come in for a period of 3 to 5 years because they want to sort of take a sabbatical and work here and give back. I think they make fantastic leaders because they speak the language, they understand the business, as well as they also come with a strong need to learn about the social sector. So the essential leadership qualities is what they bring in. I know a lot of people from who are part of, who have retired IAS and IPS officers also giving back by joining boards of the organization. So I think that's another aspect. When you have finished your career, you have a wealth of knowledge, expertise, and not necessarily from the social sector. People join in the boards, advisory or otherwise of not for profits, and give their time and network and experience. So I think that's also another way to share the wealth of your experience and be part of the social sector. So not necessarily. I think we have a great mix of people in the sector right now, and that's what we require. We have doctors who have given up their practice and started NGOs. We've got people from the social sector now moving on to policy, to working with large organizations either out of the country or in the country. So it's always great to have people move back and forth from the industries into the social sector as well.
Okay. So you've talked of the passion that people need to have and the ability to get along with people from different backgrounds. Is there a sense of fulfillment which is higher because you're working in CSR? I'm saying
Um,
it really depends
yeah,
on the person, but I'm just trying to
yeah,
understand, is it for people who are looking for fulfillment beyond a salary and for, the normal achievements that
yeah.
careers tend to give?
The corporate, I mean, say in a company, the CSR role and the CSR team is always something people in the sector look up to. It's a very glamorized role. It's also a role where a lot of NGOs are approaching you for funding, so it always puts you on a pedestal. A lot of people get heady with it. They also feel that they are the ones who are taking the decisions, which is not true. It is a role with a large amount of responsibility because you need to do the right thing. It is also a role where you can be in the spotlight for all the right and the wrong reasons as well. What it doesn't give you a lot of time is the joy of actually creating the change on the ground, because you are and you have to deal with ensuring that the money, which is the fuel for the change in the community, is going out to the agencies at the right time. It is available to them. It is also meeting all the compliance parameters. So a lot of times you become very administratively involved in getting that money process, in meeting the regulation, in getting the reporting in. People who are from the sector, having worked in the NGO with NGOs and come into corporate, often feel this dissonance in them, and a need to go back to the sector, which they do, saying that no, I'm just not enjoying. It's too much of a clerical, administrative, desk donkey kind of a job. But I think you require people on both sides. We require good professional people on all sides of the spectrum. So sometimes you finish a stint and go to the other side, and then you again make a reversal back. So yes, I think again, like I said, that it's part of creating the change on ground, and seeing what side of change making are you currently in.
Okay. Do you remember one particular instance of when a person who'd been helped, or a student or a teacher, told you something that still resounds or resonates with you? And we'll keep that at the end, because I'm saying after this, if you can just say what are the things that people need to have, what is the advice that you would give to anyone who's entering the sector, we'll close out with that.
Right. I think again, it would be from one of the projects where we were working in schools. And I remember that when we went to the school, the headmaster was I would say he wasn't really welcoming, and of course he had seen many CSR heads like us walk into the school, take an assessment, find out what could be done, and then they were disappointed with the fact that people didn't really come, never came back. And he was very curt to the point in saying, "I'm going to answer your questions only if you assure me that you're going to come back and work in my school." Right. So And I remember at that time there is so much responsibility that you carry when you step into the school, and you can't go to a school just to find out what's happening, and then make it like a joyride. So there's a lot of stark reality that you're exposing them to, which includes data as well as their own reality. And I remember going back to that same school 6 months later, and actually I could not even recognize the headmaster. He was in all ways, physically and even personality wise, a changed man. And I think I was very happy to actually hear from him. He was also part of our leadership transformation program. He had actually understood that there is a component of sustainability that needs to be brought in. He had then started to network with the local Lions and the Rotary clubs to also get their funding for his school. So while at that point the company was not giving out funds for infrastructure, like to raise another floor or to construct more buildings, he had managed to do that with the Rotary and the Lions Club. And I felt very proud of the fact that he's actually doesn't really require our funds for he'll probably not require our funds in after 2 years down the line. So I think that was sustainability, alive in action out there, and I feel very proud of the fact that we were able to make this change.
Okay. So to close, what advice would you give to people who are about to enter or considering this as a career?
Yeah, I think generic advice to anyone who's looking at this is, I think, going to be a sector where you can feel really, you can sleep well because you're trying to make a change in a system, in a country. One of the great ways to work for your country, if you don't want to be a soldier, is to work for the nation's socioeconomic progress through the social sector. It requires you to leave your ego aside. It requires you to also be ready to upskill yourself continuously. It requires a lot of humility, even though you may be a custodian of a lot of money. I think some of the most revered and respected CSR heads are those who understand that they are not any higher than or any, on a pedestal than the NGO partners. So it requires you to be very humble and yet at the same time respect the law, respect the agencies that are making this change possible, and at the same time be very grounded about your own responsibilities. So I think it continues to be a sector which is very people, I would say, centric. The change is people centric. Yes, technology has come in, and we are looking at using technology to create good. But if you enjoy working with people and through people, this is the sector to be.
Ghazal, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a privilege and a pleasure talking to you. And here's wishing you continued success on all the projects that you're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinu. And I think wonderful to actually look back and relive my own journey. And to everyone who's watching, and if this podcast has actually helped you to stay back in the sector, if you were contemplating exiting or to make an entry, I think this 1 hour is totally worth it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.